All right, today we're going to be talking about the law of cosines. We've worked on the law of sines and how to use it to go ahead and solve triangles, but it doesn't solve, unfortunately, all the triangles. And so we need to go ahead and worry about how do we get the rest of them, and that's by using the law of cosines. Now, the law of cosines has three very interesting formulas, I guess, long formulas. If you notice, there's a little bit of Pythagorean theorem in here, kind of a squared plus equals b squared plus c squared, a lot of that going on, but there's also this extra negative minus 2bc cosine of a. All three of these formulas are virtually identical. It just goes from a different location. So if we're trying to find side A here, we do a squared, and then it's the other two sides minus 2 times the other two sides, cosine of the original angle. So this is kind of an angle side, or a side angle side. This is more of a side angle side that this happens when you use this. So you have to have the side and the angle in between of it. And then that will give you the other side, which will give you a pair, and then you can do law of sines. We will always only do law of cosines once, and then you'll be able to go ahead and do law of sines for the other ones. So let me show you. So here we have a triangle, and we have 7 and 10 and the angle in between, so side angle side here. And when we have this, we can go ahead and use the law of cosines. And what we're going to do is the c squared is going to be by itself, so we're going to do the one with the c squared. And remember, again, it's going to be the c squared and then the other two sides squared minus the other two sides times each other, 2 of them, and then the cosine of the angle. So 7 squared, 10 squared, minus 2 times 7 times 10, and then cosine of 73. Now, all of this together can be typed into your calculator. And c squared equals 108.1. Then we take the square root of it, and c equals 10.4. So now when we're filling out our table, we have all of the sides going across. We have all the sides in one angle. Well, now that's a pair. And remember, once you have a pair, you can use law of sines. Law of sines, for the most part, is easier than law of cosines. So when we use it, we always want to kind of go back to it. So now we're going to have that c values that we know, that's 73 over 10.4. And then we're just going to find each of them separately. I always go with the lower number first. So we have 7 and 10. I always just go for the 7 first. There are some reasons why it won't work unless you use the lower number, but so just go with the lower number. It's usually better for that. So then we're going to go ahead and just cross multiply. So sine of A equals 7 times the sine of 73 divided by 10.4. We get a decimal, and then we hit second sine as normal. And so A equals 40 degrees. Well, once we have 40 degrees and that original 73 degrees, the last side is last angle, which is the last thing we need to find, is really easy, just subtract it from 180, and we get 67. So there's the two angles and the other side that we needed. So let's do this again. So here we have 13 and 8, so it's 8 squared plus 13 squared minus 2 times 8 times 13, cosine of the angle, which is 64. That gives me 141, take the square root of it, and I get 11.9. So now I have that 64 with the 11.9, and notice in the black, that's what I had originally, there's no pair. And so that's why I had to use the law of cosines. Now, once I got that 11.9, I can go back to the law of sines. So I do 64 over 11.9, and now I'm going to use the 8. 8 with the sine of A. Cross multiply, sine of A equals this, second sine equals 37.2. And then I go ahead from there, and I go and subtract, and I get my 78.8. And so those are my 3 other values that I go ahead and solve the triangle with. So we've gone ahead, and law of sines can do it can do angle side angle, it can do side side angle, and we can do side angle side. And if you notice, what's missing is the side side side. Well, when you're given all 3 sides, you want to use one of these. Now, these are just the law of cosines, but I just solved it for the cosine of A. So if you notice, the first one, the a squared, was over by itself, so I subtracted these 2 over, and then you divide by what's in front. So I rewrote them so that it's a little bit easier to see when you go ahead and put it in your calculator. Now, when you're doing that and putting it in your calculator, I would do this numerator and then the denominator all as one. I do the numerator, and then when you divide by the denominator, make sure that this is in parentheses so that you can get the correct answer. You can do it with the original program, that original ones, that's fine. Just a few more steps. That one already gets you into those steps to start with. So we're going to have to do law of cosines, and it says to use the largest angle first. So we're going to use the 12 here. So the C. When you're doing cosines, you can do the largest one. When you're doing sines, you want to use the smaller one. Just kind of how it goes. So the cosine C here, again, you can use just this one here at the bottom. It's the same formula, they just haven't solved for it. So C is going to be 12 squared, 9 squared, 7 squared, 2 times 9 times 7 times cosine of C. And they're going to subtract these over, just like what I showed you. So that's the numerator. If you look over here, that's just what this is up here, what they have there. And this is just what we're going to divide by. So go ahead and plug that in. This divided is the negative 126. So you can plug this all in, hit enter, then hit divide, and I'd put in the 126, the negative 126, or you could have put this all in parentheses, negative 2 times 9 times 7. You do that and cosine equals negative 0.1111. So now you have to do second cosine because we're doing cosines here. So second cosine gives me 96 degrees. Well, once I have that one value, I now have a pair and I can start doing my law of sines. So that 96 degrees here is over the 12, and then we can go over 7. And we can start cross multiplying. The sine of b equals 0.5801. Second sine of that, and b equals 35 degrees. Now that we have 96 and 35, I can find out the last side by subtracting from 180, and we get 48. And notice we get 3 different angles this time, but we had the 3 sides to start with. All right, let's try that again. So cosine of A, I started with the smallest one. The cosine, that doesn't matter as much. It is probably better to do the bigger one, but it does work out either way. So 3 squared minus 8 squared minus 10 squared, and then divided by this amount. So put that in your calculator, hit enter, divided by, put these in parentheses, and you get 0.96875, and second cosine, make sure it's cosine because we are doing the cosine here, and I get 14.4. Once I've done that, I now have a pair, and I can cross multiply. Again, I'm going with the smaller one, and B ends up being, after I do a second B, second sine here, I get 41.5, and then that's real easy to just subtract and get my C value. So when you're solving these triangles, when you have 2 angles and a side, so angle, angle, side, or angle, side, angle, you're doing law of sines. When you have 2 sides and the angle opposite them, so that's the side, side angle, you're doing law of sines. That's the one, of course, that we have to check to make sure that there's not 2 triangles for. The side, side angle, that case, the one that Miss O'Day warned you about. 2 sides and their included angles, side, side is law of cosines. And side, side, side is also law of cosines. Again, you use the law of cosines once, and then it's always back to law of sines. So an example of how we can use this, 2 pilots in a stationary airplane look 38 degrees to the left of the runway and see a bus 75 feet away. They look 28 degrees to the right, and they see a truck. How far are those away? So we can go ahead and create a diagram here. And so the bus was over here 38 degrees, and the truck was over here 28 degrees. And so we have a side, we know the angle, and the other side. And so we can use the law of cosines to go ahead and find out what that other side is across the way. So 75 plus 110 minus 75 and 110, cosine of 66. You get a really big number, but we're just taking the square root of it, so 105. So they are 105 feet apart. Now, could we solve the rest of the triangle? Absolutely. But that's all they asked for, was how far apart these were here, this other side. And once we have it, we can be done. If we wanted to find these different angles, we could then, of course, go ahead and do so. All right, and that's what I have for you today.